Mocap, animations, game engines, and VR. Oh my, let's get to it. You are listening to the How to Create VR podcast, weekly conversations with VR professional creators, designers, and producers. Hello and welcome to another episode of the How to Create VR podcast, where I speak with professional creators, designers, developers, and producers who work on VR, AR, and MR projects. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the guy behind howtocreatevr.com. I'm a VR evangelist, spreading the word by hosting this weekly podcast, a monthly hands-up meetup in Southern California, and presenting in conferences. You can find out more at howtocreatevr.com. I'm lucky to have two really talented guests today. Veronica Flint, a VR designer, developer, and content creator, and TK Gorgonia, a performance capture director, actor, and producer. Together, we'll be chatting all about mocap, animations, game engines, and VR. Veronica and TK, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I'm glad you guys are here. I met the both of you at VRLA. Actually, I watched your cinematic VR experience called the Chimerical Era. Did I pronounce it right? I think it's Chimerical Era, right?
Yeah, the Chimerical Era.
Chimerical Era. Anyway, I remember watching it. It was really, really good. Maybe you can tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so this was a concept project that I had in the back of my mind for a while. But it wasn't until last year when TK wanted to create a video game cinematic or real-time motion capture cinematic. I approached him about an idea for a project. I pitched it to him and I showed him, the type of world and look and story we're going for. And then we went from there and started planning out how we're going to shoot it. I showed him like a prototypey blocked out scene in 3D as a 3D environment. And then we wrote a short script around this world and environment we already built out. I wrote out a script and then TK gave the okay to go ahead and start shooting after some adjustments to it. We did casting and scheduled, shoot dates for a motion capture shoot and got a nice group of talented people together to work on it. So,
and with this, there was a lot of involvement with mocap, right, TK?
Yeah, all of our animation started with the basis of performance capture and motion capture. And then after all of that, Veronica came in and, cleaned and blended all the animations together to pretty much get what you saw at VRLA.
Right. Tell us a little bit about the story behind it. What is the actual story for people to know more?
So the story, it's based on a script that Veronica had been writing for about 11 years now. Basically, what we showed for VRLA is a little sneak peek into that bigger world and script, and it follows these two characters, Matthew and Lorena, and there are two heroes set in this futuristic steampunk alternate reality, and basically there's a ancient device of sorts that kind of fell into the wrong hands, and it's up to Matthew and Lorena to retrieve that device, retrieve these ancient artifacts, and make sure it's used for good and not for evil kind of thing.
It's actually a really cool experience. I really enjoyed it. Before we're going to continue going down this path, because this is going to lead us to a whole bunch of other questions on mocap and animations, Veronica, I wanted to get your background. How did you get into VR, specifically into VR? Because I know you've been doing a lot of media stuff, but specifically into VR. And do you remember what VR experience is the one that convinced you to jump in and start creating?
So I started out doing mostly learning how to do motion capture animation and Unity development. And so my introduction to game engine was basically Unity, and I wanted to, the end goal was to learn how to tell stories in games and cinematics, or just creating cinematics just so I can tell stories in games, but also wanted to learn also about the immersive ways of doing interactive storytelling as well. So game design, narrative, things like that. It wasn't until I heard about the Oculus Rift, and I've been hearing about the Kickstarter and it getting the funding for the headsets. I was able to try it out for the first time in 2013 at E3. That was my introduction to trying out the headset and seeing how it goes from there. But I think it was the second time when it really realized the potential of VR, and that was at Indiecade. And I was in some cockpit of an airplane, and I was flying around, and it actually felt like I was there in the plane flying around, like realistically. I was like, oh wow, like it doesn't matter like the graphics are low poly or not. I just actually felt like I was actually part of that world. I was keeping track of the progress of, from 2013 to 2014 of like where it's all going to go from there. I tried it again, like a second version of the Rift at E3, and it was Lucky's Tale, and it really did. When I played the game, it really did feel like I was like on an actual attraction or ride at Disneyland, and that feeling of moving forward in space in VR was exciting, and like it blew my mind away. Like my mind was blown. So I when I finally got the chance of like having hands-on access with a developer kit of the Oculus Dev Kit 2, I was like, I just started like hooking it up and playing it and hooking up to Unity and downloading all these apps and applications and games and experiences that people in the indie scene have been developing. And I was like, oh shoot, this is really cool. This is amazing. Look at what the VR community has already created. And like the early ones were really cool. Like Senza Peso was like one of the original ones that like really got me even more into like wanting to make VR. As more VR experiences continued being made every month or every week, I was just excited about the potential creatively, and where the imagination of what you can do with creating these worlds. So, and yeah, I really enjoy a lot of the work of like what all these different companies are doing. I'd say like Within's Life of Us would be like the one that left me in a big impression on me. That would be like one of my favorites. And then that one and a lot of the location-based VR I really enjoy. Like I really enjoyed Carne Arena, and this one by Starbreeze Studios called Hero, which is you're in a Syrian type world and you hear an explosion happening around you. And I was like, and you have all these sensory effects happening around you and positional audio. And I really do like the social aspect of having multiple people in one VR experience and sharing it with everyone else at the same time. So, and Life of Us was also very much like that. So,
what about you, TK? What was your first experience, and how did you get into VR?
It's kind of split. Like the first time consciously hearing about VR was actually through John Root, one of the co-founders of VRLA. I was just starting with motion capture. He was we had this like 2-day like motion capture summit kind of getaway, and he was one of the tech gurus or like instructors. He was he had been in the motion capture scene for a while, and then he was teaching us about that, but he was also sharing that like VR is like the next thing that he's moved on to. And I was like, oh, cool, like VR. So it's a split between that and I can't remember what specifically, but there's this. I remember reading an article or seeing a video where they started using like the VR technology for medicine, and it was a mix of someone using like the VR in combination with the robotic arms to perform very intricate surgeries in the ER and whatnot. And I thought like that was amazing because I originally went to college as a nursing major, so medicine was like my original practice. So going into like entertainment and video games and film, but still having that, that knowledge and that background, like is something that kind of turned me on to like what is VR and what can it do, and what are the applications that can be used that are beyond, video or video games.
And what's your favorite VR experience today that you can pinpoint, and why?
It's hard because like I really love the entertainment, like fun stuff like Robo Recall. My first VR experience was actually the early demo version Bullet Train at VRLA. So that was the first time at the very first VRLA that they hosted, at least for the public, like I got to try Bullet Train, and that was really cool. And then, when I got Oculus Rift, I was constantly playing Robo Recall. But in terms of like overall experience and like feeling immersed, definitely Carne Arena was one of my favorite, just because it's I think Alejandro Inarritu took it to like the next level with it comes to mixed reality and really submerging people in his exhibit. And like I really would love to have that kind of to eventually work and create something of that level. It's funny because Veronica, you mentioned Hero, which I didn't get to see, but I heard was from Veronica. She told me it was super awesome and immersive, but I got to help with the performance capture on that. So filming it was really interesting with the kids and with the actors, and then hearing all these things about it, but not getting to see it was really awesome. So I'm really into like those kind of things that really make you question what is reality kind of thing, whether it's for, entertainment or, for a higher society purpose kind of thing.
Well, let's jump into mocap. Let's define mocap. Whoever wants to take this question.
I guess I could define it in terms, the way I like to see it is like it's capturing human movement in a digital space. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking either humans or animals and capturing them in real time, but converting that movement into in the form of digital means and algorithms and numbers, and using that data to help create these digital skeletons that drive our digital characters. In terms of how it works, then I guess more specifically for animation, like Veronica, if you wanted to take that on.
So a lot of times video game companies go with motion capture, not just because it can do realistic human movements, but it also it's a lot faster to do motion capture with actors and
right.
and everybody with there together, rather than just keyframing animation, because obviously keyframing takes a long time. So, and the good thing about motion capture is you could not just use it to capture actors, but you can capture animals, you can capture props, you can capture cameras and do virtual cameras.
Mm-hmm.
You can put any of those actors or whatever you're doing within that motion capture stage and put them in a virtual environment anywhere, or they could be in a vehicle, or they can be in a house in space, and the actors could, or the crew or the directors can see what the final output would look like, either in a previs form or a game engine or motion builder. So the director can use a virtual camera and direct their actors, and it's this virtual film, or they call it virtual production, but now you can also not just do that, but now that we have VR, you can even put on the VR headset and be where you are in that world and space.
I think they did that in Ready Player One, right? Steven Spielberg?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly like that. It can be a combination of VR headsets, virtual cameras, or even mixed reality too. It's really, I think even before the VR headsets were a thing, like at USC they were using motion capture technology to track a HMD, head mounted displays, and putting markers on the headsets and having a motion capture volume and tracking your head movements around and moving around, and it being able to track where you are. So motion capture it's used for a lot of different things: projection mapping, prevising or virtual production, games, movies. So it's a huge technology that's being used for a lot of different things.
And there's a couple of VR applications that I know of. I'm trying to remember their names. I think Mindshow is one, which is by the co-founder of VRLA, Cosmo. They can do motion capture with that. So expand a little bit on the ways that you can capture motion. It seems like today with VR HMDs, you can do not full body capturing, right? Because you don't have all the sensors yet. But what are some of the ways that you capture motion today?
So the old school or traditional way is the optical motion capture route. So you have the Vicon and the OptiTrax and the VSpaces. But there's also the less expensive ways, like the Inertia motion capture suits, where it's just IMU inertia sensors that could be used either as straps or suits. Those are sensitive to magnets or metals. There's pros and cons to every motion capture system. So like optical versus inertia. I'd say that like the inertia motion capture suits, like the Exens or perception neurons, they're a little bit more portable. So like you can motion capture in your bedroom or on a street if you'd like to, or in a gym. And then so there are those, and then like there's also the off-the-shelf products like the Kinect, or there are like markerless body motion capture softwares that are available for like back in the day. It's still around, but people used to use the Kinect or Kinect version 2 or the PlayStation Eyes to capture markerless skeletal data, and you can apply that same basic concept, like record the motion capture from a Kinect and apply it to a digital character. There's lots of different like tech now. I think now that we have the VR headsets and controllers, people are able to do full motion body capturing by driving avatars with Vive trackers and touch controllers. So like attaching a Vive tracker to your foot or your hand, and then or your hip, and doing motion capture by having the headset as the head marker and 2 controllers as your hands. So that's what some people are trying to do with just off the shelf consumer grade level motion capture.
There's VR suits, right, too, like the Tesla suit that supposedly does motion capture as well.
Yeah.
So is motion capture pretty accessible today, would you say? I mean, I remember there was a time where motion capture was really just for the big studios, right? It was multi-million-dollar setup. But would you say today indie studios or even a freelancer can start doing motion capture on the inexpensive side?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. There's still, the big studios are still around, and the quality they deliver is still like top notch. Again, it's just one of those things where you kind of get where you pay for, or like if you're using one of those more accessible solutions, there are, like Veronica said, like pros and cons, and you kind of just know you got to know how to work it, kind of thing.
The limits of it, yeah.
Yeah,
kind of like green screen at a studio versus green screen at your home.
Exactly. So yeah, it's the user. There was this kind of thing where it's like, when I was doing voiceover, it's like it's not essentially the mic. Sometimes it's the performer. So yeah, it helps to have great, amazing technology, but if you don't know how to use it or you don't know how to work it, or like a professional voiceover or can make an iPhone mic sound amazing. So.
What about facial recognition? Where do you guys see that going? Because that's happening with the Adobe app. I'm trying to remember the name of it, which will recognize your face and gestures with a camera, a simple webcam.
I don't remember the names, but there are a couple like facial capture solutions out there, like tons of software, both again professional and free software. There's some that I've seen on Steam that people use or kind of jerry rig on their own, and then there's like the more professional standards that high-end studios and actors use for their projects. And it's in a similar sense. The facial capture as well as motion capture for hands, those are typically the 2 most difficult things to get correctly or to get smoothly, just because of kind of it's a mixture of what's available and like just how they move and how they work and the intricacies of them.
Yeah, I've tried out and played around with the face tracking SDK on AR kit for the iPhone 10, and
does it work pretty well?
Yeah, it works pretty well actually. It could even be used for facial capture if you wanted to do like a combination of motion capture and facial capture. It has the same tech. Basically, I think the same company that built the Kinect, which was like an IR sensor, depth sensor. Basically, that technology is on the iPhone 10, so right. it can do 3D scans. It can do tracking on the expressions on your face without having to do like a. It's pretty fast. Like it's a lot smarter. So as far as like detecting faces.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what like tech can do, or like what the iPhone 10 can do now, and just all the free or accessible software we have like on our phones, and what you can actually use. You can actually use them for production if you know how to use them.
Which 20 years ago or even 10 years ago didn't even exist or would cost $1 million. Yeah. By the way, it was Adobe Character Animator, the one that I was thinking about.
Right.
Well, and then with HMDs that are being built where they will do eye tracking, and then they can they can tell your gestures as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, typically with like, at least when it comes to animating faces, there's kind of a list of different expressions. Just like in motion capture, we call it a ROM. It's like a range of motion, and it kind of tests the limits of body movement. So there's also kind of a facial ROM that kind of sees all the different expressions and all the limits that the face can make. And then within the softwares, it usually helps, calculate those and put them together to make realistic facial movements. Of course, the depth of it depends on the software, but
yeah, I was playing around with the Amazon Sumerian, which is like a Unity, obviously not to that extent, but on the web, and they have these hosts where you can just type in speech, and you can actually put it. It could actually read your speech and inject gestures into it for you.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was really crazy. Yeah, when I saw it, it blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is really crazy. There's literally a button that you say, auto gestures, and it reads your entire script, and it'll insert this markup language for gestures, or you can insert your own.
Like those digital avatars.
Pretty crazy stuff. Forgetting technology right now, let's get you mentioned this TK performance, right? What are some things that are really important for a good mocap performance? Because like you said, you can have the greatest camera in the world, but if the person is a terrible photographer, right? Or you can have the greatest photographer in the world take the best pictures with, an iPhone.
Well, in terms of performance capture, I guess just to if there's a difference, performance capture versus motion capture. Motion capture is generally used just for like motion, locomotion, stunts, those kind of things. When we talk about performance capture, that's typically in relation to, we start to get into the realms of the acting part, the subtleties of, the facial recognition or the facial capture of someone being sad or depressed, and those little subtleties. So, someone who is more acting based is very different from someone who's a stunt performer and does fights. So the performance capture is kind of like a holistic kind of thing, while motion will focus more on motion. In terms of performing, it is a lot like theater. A lot of people say it's a lot like theater because you have to be really conscious of your body and, what message or what story that you're trying to get across, what your character, just things from like, how your character stands to how they walk to there's differences in even how they point or how they hand something, like little subtle things, but can tell so many things about that character or the story based on how they move. In terms of performing for motion capture, those are things that are kind of like you have to be conscious of. Back when motion capture was still, developing, and though it is still kind of coming out in the limelight, it's been around, and the performances were very theatrical and big, and like you would have to gesture really big and like as if you were trying to act to someone at the back of a theater so they can see. Versus now, because we have such great technology, you don't have to be so like comical or hysterical or
more natural.
Yeah, you can be a lot more natural and you can get these really, really more believable performances. So a lot of it comes down to really, are you just a good actor? Are you a good performer? There's a mixture of different things, just because we'll say like dancers are really great because they understand body movement, but then a dancer versus a stunt or a martial artist is very specific, because if we're going to do fights or if we're going to do like a video game, we need someone who is in terms of pretty much ready to get beat up or put their body through all these hoops and tests and movements, because it's constantly going. It's not like film where you wait and then you do a scene and then you wait and then you do another scene. There's not as many breaks in between. It's kind of like go, 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 go. In a typical average day, we'll get like 300 shots.
Oh my God, you got to be in great shape then.
Yeah, you got to be in decent shape, or you got to know how to work your body. There are tons of people who are, you look at them and be like, oh man, they're not buff or they're not cut, but they have stamina, or they know how to move and they know how to conserve their energy, or they're just really great at performing with their body and knowing what they can do. And so it's a bit of understanding with that.
And it seems like you have to be aware of not just your performance, but every little movement of your body and your face, because you're being captured, right? And like you said, you don't want to over exaggerate, but you can't under either, because it has to be captured.
Yeah, and it depends on, these are things where, you got to be a fan of, of the content, where it's like if you're working on like a Marvel or DC or whatever, like you got to know those are superhero things, and those are very different from doing something that's whatever, like CSI or something more dramatic or something. You got to understand what your content is, and even what platform it is. Something VR, you are definitely going to be seen all the way around, 360. Everyone's going to see every inch of your body, how you stand, how you walk, how you, gesture, versus if it's like a video game or just a CG short film kind of thing, then they're going to, have a certain frame. They're going to have a close-up here. So, okay, the director tells you you're going to have a close-up on your face, then you don't have to worry so much about your legs, So it's kind of a bit of understanding in that sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So we shot the scene, we captured the motion data. What do we do with it now, Veronica? How do we get it into Unity or Unreal?
A lot of the time, I use a combination of like two different softwares, Maya, and then there's Motion Builder. So I tend to like edit, stitch, and clean up most of the motion capture data in Motion Builder, because of the tools is just more motion capture friendly. So I tend to like take whatever we shoot, like all the selects, and then characterize them in scenes, characters, takes, and throw them all in organized folders. But then it's very similar to how you would edit video, like video editing, because Motion Builder has the tools that are friendly for people who already know how to edit video on a timeline. So I tend to take all these like different motion capture takes and tracks, and then I layer them all in a timeline track, and I stitch them and put them together. But it's very user friendly, because then I can edit and adjust the placements and the movements and the speed of the movements, and there's so many different tools that you can do with Motion Builder to make your character animations however you want to make them. So it's easy to like modify and adjust on the go, on the fly, very quickly. And cleaning up any errors in the motion capture data, I just usually do that in Motion Builder as well. Some people like to clean up in Motive, which is OptiTrack or Vicon's cleaning up system. Since I already knew Motion Builder more confident in that software, I was able to do it in that. Basically, when I get all like the base motion capture all set to go and ready, if I need to like add additional elements like facial capture or animating props, I usually combine separately. Any polishment or adjustments I also can do in Maya. So typically what I've been doing is like applying both facial capture and motion capture in Maya. I also do a lot of like facial animation cleanup in Maya, because I feel like Maya is a lot more animator friendly than Motion Builder, especially if you're already an animator who's already animating in Maya. But as far as like putting together different takes and blending animations of motion capture data, Motion Builder would be my go-to. Yeah, after that, it's just like when you're finalized and happy with your character animations, you can then just export whatever you have and then import it into Unity, and then like everything is usually aligned and snapped together in placement, whatever you have in your Motion Builder and Maya scene. And then when you snap it into Unity, it's usually perfectly the way you'd want it. If I ever like need to fine tune anything, I could also do it in Unity. So like, especially if you're doing VR, it's so much easier to like tweak camera changes and camera movements in Unity if you're doing VR, because you can just automatically check in the VR headset whenever you like change a keyframe in Unity, and make adjustment to like a curve or a keyframe on a certain timeline or time code in Unity. So, but Unity and Motion Builder, they work pretty good all together. Like Unity, like it understands all that software. Like if you have a time code and you want to know when the audio plays or not, the time code and frame rate, it works hand in hand together. So it's pretty. If you already know Maya Motion Builder and you're wanting to do like the timeline stuff in Unity, you'll have a very easy time getting it put together.
So during the production of a motion capture, are you there, Veronica, to sort of guide TK from the technical perspective? In other words, look, this is the environment we're working in virtually, right? So don't be so big, these are the limits size-wise. I mean, do you give direction like that as well?
Usually before we do a take, I would ask TK where are these characters in the environment, and where they'll be entering or where they'll be exiting, and then like sometimes working with TK with the actors, telling them where they should move or where they should look whenever something happens. So, and we also have like an environment in Unity that we tend to show the actors where they're going to be walking into or what's going to be happening. So they
get an idea of scale.
Yeah, that's usually the process that at least I like to go about. I like to meet with either the creator or the animator, the person who's going to be handling the data on the post end, or is that seeing it the most, and trying to get an idea of what they need even before going into the shoot, just so that way the day of the shoot we're not wasting time. We're trying to figure things out. Our actors aren't sitting around. Our techs aren't sitting around. And I'm really big on previs, so storyboarding, getting a feel for the environment, getting pictures, creating a lookbook that I could send out as early as possible to our performers, our techs, our our team who needs to know what they look like, what they move like. Like in terms of Chimerical Era, we had multiple mocap shoots, some of them more performance and acting, some of them purely for the stunts and the fighting. And so the actors just had to know they had to know their lines, they had to know the personalities, the characteristics of our heroes. Whereas the stunts, they had to know the way our characters move. They were playing off what our performance capture actors did. But in terms of stunts, they had to understand, what are their fight styles? What are their, are they martial art based? Are they more brawler? And so having all of that prepared beforehand, and then having Veronica there at the actual shoot to be like, okay, cool, I like the performance, I'm happy with the acting, how's the data, how does the movement, does that look correct, does that make sense with our environment, does that make sense with what needs to be processed or cleaned up, are we missing anything, kind of thing.
So is there like a script for this that you follow along and track all this information? Because I would imagine it's not just talking it, but you got to track it somewhere. So what's that process like?
The data itself?
Well, the data and all these questions, right? You kind of like when you go through a script, you kind of like, you have a script supervisor there making sure that everything is hit the way. Do you have something similar for this?
It's not always there. Usually we'll have like an AD or a script supervisor, and typically it's the same person. When I'm a tech and I'm actually helping capture the data, they'll usually be also the AD and keeping track of all the takes. So then if the director talks to me and they're like, okay, I like that performance, select that. Then I'll make notes. I'm like, okay, they want take 3 because of this, this, and this. So then I'll have that the same when I'm on set or if I'm directing or producing. Either I'll take care of it myself or I'll have a script supervisor and be like, okay, where are we in the script? Do we have all the takes we need? In terms of like the information and knowing the background, the environment, the way they move, like all of that's within me. And, if an actor or performer or anyone, the way I consider it is, if anyone has a question about the performance of the characters or the project as a whole, I should be able to answer every question beforehand. So a lot of it is a lot of prep. So I spend days, weeks creating lookbooks, thinking about it all and preparing that way. If an actor says like, oh, can we try moving this way? Does he use a sword? I could either say yes or no based on, what we need or what we originally agreed on.
And what about once you capture that motion data? Do you know right away if it's good data, or is this something you find out later during post when you go sit down and bring it into Unity and do all your cleanup? Or do you know right away, right after captured, if it was good or bad?
A little bit of both. Yeah, because we do see the data, like we can have it played back and we can see the digital skeletons. But then in terms of it, like, does it fit perfectly with our environment? Like that's all for, Veronica or whoever's on the post end to see.
If it doesn't work perfectly in post, Veronica, are you able to manipulate it in post, or do you guys have to go and basically recapture?
Most of the time, it's easier to just polish it in in the animation software like Motion Builder or Maya, because it's like, well, what's the fastest and cost-efficient way of fixing whatever's happening in the mocap data. There was only like one moment or one scene or shoot we had to reshoot, only because the amount of the data being messed up would have taken too long to clean up. But other than that, it's just like little things, like little hitches that only happen from like a couple of frames or whatever. That can be super easy to just fix it up in post anyways. So, but yeah, it depends on how bad it is. But it's been mostly like pretty clean. So
yeah, a lot of it's like QC from the actual mocap technicians to be like, okay, like we should probably reshoot that, or no, we're good. You'd probably, we usually trust them to tell us if the data is really, really bad to the point where we should do another take, or it's acceptable to the point where, because they're the ones essentially delivering the data to us in the post end. So it's the communication between all departments.
Well, we're pretty close to the end here of the podcast. I did want to ask you just a couple more questions, and this is the same question to both of you guys. What one tip would you give someone getting into VR, animation, mocap, besides don't get in?
Well, if you're already a fan of VR and games and motion capture, I'd say pick up the hardware and software to start creating the content, even if they're just little small demos or prototypes or films. Just like create small tiny versions of it and create multiple different projects, even if they're like 30 seconds long to 3 minutes long, and then just learn from the stuff that you create each time you create it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because you just got to do it every day. I feel like Veronica is literally in a headset every day, studying or doing something. For me personally, I think what's worked the best for me and the way I approach things is really just trying to be empathetic as much as I can to the process. Whether you're the actor or the animator or the tech, just understanding the other side of things. And you don't have to be a professional in all aspects, but if you can just have that open communication, figure out what it's like to be on the other side, that way you can communicate what you need, and you can also service, the other departments, because it takes a village. You're all part of the same team. So the better people are able to communicate and understand, like, okay, this is why this is happening, or this is why this is taking this long. Like, I get it. And so it just helps things move so much smoother. So being able to empathize with that, with other people, with other departments, just with the process, is take people really far.
Well, finally, what I wanted to ask you was, what do you want VR to be like in, let's say, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I can see like VR being in somebody's everyday lives, like how a smartphone is within our everyday lives, but it wouldn't be as bulky, or it would look like, a pair of glasses that's kind of like convenient and modern and sleek, like kind of like how you would have, it's basically like a mini laptop smartphone, but on a wearable tech. I also think like now that the technology will catch up, and the graphics cards and the CPUs will decrease in size but increase in power and visual fidelity. So we're getting to the point where the real-time rendering stuff looks like real life. So there's going to be a point where we can't tell the difference.
Between reality and virtual.
Kinda, yeah, actually.
Yeah, I know. Scary and cool at the same time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How about you, TK?
Yeah, I agree. Just to be able to see it everywhere would be really cool. Really, I saw this thing recently on... I was curious because I had an Oculus Rift, and I recently just got a Vive via Veronica, which was really nice. And I was just curious, like, I didn't know if people could play on, the same game on different headsets. So I just searched it on Google, and I ended up on Steam, and someone had said, I hope that I can play on, me and my friend can play on like Vive and Oculus, because I think VR should be bringing people together versus tearing them apart. And I thought that was really cool. So yeah, that's kind of where I would like to see it. Just bringing more people together, helping empathize with each other and see other perspectives and open people's minds to things, and just sharing and teaching and influencing the next generations.
Well, that's an excellent way to close this podcast. I really want to thank you, Veronica and TK, for being on my podcast. It was truly enlightening, and you guys shared a lot of great information with us, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
People want to get a hold of you guys? You want to give your Twitter or email, whatever you guys want?
You can reach me on my Twitter at Corvinia, Instagram Corvinia Flint. You can also email me at corviniaflint@gmail.com. And then if you want to follow the project, we have a website, www.chimericalera.com. Quixotical.world is also our team name, studio name. So
yeah, and then for me, TK Gorgonia, Gorgonia. That's the same on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, mostly Instagram. But yeah, I also have a website, just tkgorgonia.com. And yeah, check out quixotical.world and the Chimerical and that's where you can follow us. And we'll be doing more like dev blogs as we push forward with the Chimerical Era and start going to festivals and going to other conventions and showing it off. And you can kind of see behind the scenes on like how we're doing things, or get to meet the team even more on a personal level and see what it's like on a weekly, monthly basis kind of thing.
And actually, you guys are going to be in my meetup, right, in June?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're going to be presenting there, doing a live motion capture. It's going to be super cool. So everybody should definitely check out howtocreatevr.com/meetup in June. I believe, Veronica, you'll be there too, right?
yeah.
Perfect. Now I've got you recorded. You guys can't bail on me. That's it. It's over. It's there. It's over. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks.
Thank you.
And to the rest of you guys, I was glad you were here with me. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and like us on iTunes or SoundCloud. For more episodes, check out howtocreatevr.com/iTunes or howtocreatevr.com/SoundCloud. If you are ever in the Southern California area, we have a monthly meetup with lots of great presenters. You can join or RSVP for our next meetup at howtocreatevr.com/meetup. Finally, if you are interested in learning more about how to create VR, AR, and MR experiences, please visit howtocreatevr.com. So until the next episode, I'm your host, Marcelo Lewin. Cheers, everyone.